All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar all on Google Classroom and Gemini. We're so excited that you're here. My name is Lauren Dennis with Design for Learning, and I'll be your moderator for this session. So please feel free to pop your questions over in the chat, and I will call them out to the facilitator for you. I'll also be popping all the resources for this session over there as well. We should have time for Q&A at the end. And then one final thing, this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with the recording link 24 hours after we end. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to your amazing facilitator, Mary Howard.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I am really excited to be here today, sharing with you what we could call the Google Classroom Refresh, the Educator's Back to School Guide. And what it is it is a lot of new information and exciting things for your classrooms in Google Classroom. And so again, my name is Mary Howard, and I'm a former sixth grade teacher and always have been an educational technology advocate. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about what we have today. So I've broken our session here into 5 sections with a little bonus and more section at the end. And this may feel like a fire hose of information coming at you today. So thank goodness this is being recorded. You'll have opportunities to kind of stop in each little section on the replay and explore, because you're really going to want to explore and dabble in everything. With the amount of information that I'm sharing with you guys today, it's very, very difficult to go step by step through every single little detail. So a little self exploration will be certainly necessary as we go along. So our 5+ sections are, we're going to first talk about the redesigned homepage and navigation. If you've opened Google Classroom already this year, you've seen it has a new look. Things are located in slightly different spots, and there's some new features. So we're going to look at those. Secondly, we're going to talk about Google Gemini built in, integrated into Google Classroom, and how that can affect your workflows. We're going to look at some great ideas that are now right at your fingertips in Google Classroom. And then we're going to talk about how we can accelerate learning with Gemini Notebook. It used to be called Notebook LM. Now they're calling it Gemini Notebook, and it is an absolute powerhouse of a tool for your classrooms. And then we're going to talk about Google Gems and how you can use Gems to support your students' learning. And last but not least, these really got me excited. There's some interactive literacy and practice tools that I just discovered myself that are now integrated into Classroom. And then there's the and more part. So we're going to roll on into it, and I'm going to show you the newly redesigned homepage that Google Classroom has for this year. The biggest change that you will see is there are now tailored role views, or role tailored views. And essentially what that means is on the top of the page, you're going to see, if you have administrative access in Google Classroom, you're going to see a tab that shows Admin View. Then you have the option to switch to a Teaching View. And then you have the option to switch to an Enrolled View. So for me as a teacher, at the top of my Google Classroom, I don't have administrative access, but I have teaching access, and I have classes that I'm taking independently. So I can now toggle between the look of those 2 pages. Some people may also have administrative view, and that just allows you to toggle back and forth and access the features and functionality that are in each one of those sections. So to do that is very simple. When you're on your Google Classroom homepage, this is sort of a screenshot and it's enlarged in that spot. All you would do is, if you're clicking the home spot, you're just going to see these icons. So if you do have administrative access, it looks like this. Many of us don't. The teaching access is going to look like this, and then the classes that you are enrolled in, perhaps for your own personal professional development, you would click on this and it would show you your classes. If you're a teacher, primarily, you're just going to be in the teaching mode anyway. So a really quick glimpse. I'm not going to dive into a lot of detail, but I'm going to give you a quick glimpse of what each one of these individual sections looks like when it's populated, and if you're looking at it separately. So in the teaching view, we have a few new things that we may not have seen before. The first thing is this section here called the Grading Pulse. It's essentially an overview of the courses that you are teaching, the assignments that you have pushed out, and the work in progress. So they've sort of consolidated and put it here on the screen. Down beneath that, comprehension benchmarks. We're going to be going through these, and I think section 4 today, but this is a spot where you can quickly access some of these new tools, such as video questions, practice sets, and reading tools at the click of a button. And then this is going to look familiar. This is the course overview. You've seen this before. This is sort of like what the old look was. And that's at the bottom as a visual grid of all of the courses or classes that you're teaching. Over here, we have Get Quick Help. We're going to be going through these tools together today. I'll reference it as the Feature Spotlight section, but this is the spot where Google has put Gemini's new features right at your fingertips. So you can access at the click of the button Gems, you can access Gemini, you can access Notebook LM, as it says on the screen, but it's now known as Gemini Notebook, and a chatbot through Gemini. And then up here at the top are actionable alerts. And so this little panel here is telling you if you have things that you need to attend to immediately. So that's the new teaching view. The enrolled student view is only slightly switched around, but it is going to give students an overview of the courses that they're taking. It's going to give them access to some class learning tools. And these are things built by the teacher in each course to support student learning on a variety of topics. And then over here are the updates and the things that are due. So the deadlines and study aid materials that might be available. So that's what a student view would look like. And then finally, the admin view. So the admin view has the same feature spotlight that educators have. It has some IT oversight tools as well as a tool hub. And then over here, there's the school pulse. And so these are just kind of things overall an administrator might look at the educators are doing in their classrooms in terms of students completing assignments and meeting goals and things like that. Okay, the last thing in the new section here is the ability to kind of customize your screen. And essentially what that means is you do have the option if it's overwhelming. For me, definitely overwhelming. There's too much at a glance. I sort of like the old look better. So you can use these buttons right here to collapse these individual sections. So you can collapse the feature spotlight, those class insights, things that might be due. And if you do, it's going to look a little bit more like that traditional panel that you might be used to looking at. So it's nice to know that you can tidy up your screen a little bit. And then finally, access to your classes. So while you're on your home screen in Google Classroom, if you look here, it's going to show this teaching section, and you'll always be able to find your classes quickly and easily in the teaching section. So depending on how many courses you have, you look at teaching and then you'll see down here. And again, this is a little bit more like the traditional view. So it's good to know that this is still here as it was before. Okay, as I said, we're going to have a few stop points along the way in our video. And so this would be a good spot, if you're viewing this, especially on the replay, to pause the video and take a moment to look at those new tools and those new features and that new layout that Google Classroom offers, because we're going to be moving on to a new topic. So this is pause point number 1 before we start the second topic. Okay. I don't know if there's been any questions. I don't see anything in the comments, but certainly as I'm going along, if something comes up and you have comments, or if I've rushed through something, you want a little bit more elaboration, by all means comment. Lauren is in there watching the comments and I can see them as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the Gemini in Classroom workflow. Essentially, it's the feature, one of the tools in the feature spotlight section that you may have seen me show on the middle of the screen. So Gemini is integrated into Google Classroom. And when you click on this icon in the Feature Spotlight section, you're going to see a couple of things. The first thing is you're going to see a suite of AI tools that are customizable and create products or items that you can share with your students in your Google Classroom. And so you can see here there's 12 different tools that you click and they do a specific task. Needless to say, we don't have time to go through every single one of these tools and show what each one of them does, but let me assure you, some of them are absolutely life-changing for educators. And I have to say, generating a quiz is amazing because it's a built-in quiz generator that makes a Google form for you that integrates directly into Google Classroom, so you can have your Google Forms made, attached to assignments, use AI to support you in creating those quizzes, and so forth. And so you've got all of these choices. So I had to pick one for us to look at. So we're going to be looking at one of them in just a moment. The second thing you're going to see are these prompt starters. Now, these are a little bit different than the tools we looked at. The prompt starters are going to send you out into a Google Gemini chat, and that chat has a specific prompt already built in. And so it's got a specific task that it may do. So brainstorm real world examples. So you're going to open up Gemini and it's going to be ready to go, and it's going to listen to your prompt asking, could you give me some real world examples of kinetic energy? So rather than these being tools, these are just really pre-formatted prompts. So they're going to give you some a Gemini chatbot that's ready to go with a specific task. Okay, so I said we were going to do one of the tools. The one I picked was create a rubric because it feels like something that many educators need and can use. So I'm going to take you step by step through what it would look like if you clicked on one of these tools and created a rubric. And like I said, they're not really chatbots. They're actually AI-powered tools for creating content. So we're going to design that rubric. So the first thing you do after you click on that rubric option is you're going to see a panel pop up. And here's where you're sort of programming it to make this rubric specifically for your class. So my target grade in this case is 6th grade. And over here, I want my rubric to have 4 different performance levels. Now, the next thing you can do is you can add some specific assignment instructions. So for mine, I've got my grade level, my performance levels designated. And now what I want it to do is I want it to look at my claim evidence reasoning assignment that I had previously shared with my students, because I want this rubric to score claim evidence reasoning paragraphs that my students are writing. And I want it to do it based on my criteria that I've already established with my students. So I was able to attach this file from my Google Drive in order for it to evaluate it to create the rubric. Now I could have, and I can also describe the knowledge or skills that the students need to demonstrate. And so I added a little bit of text here just saying what they're doing is they're writing a grade level claim evidence reasoning that meets next generation science standards, just to give it a little extra. And then I gave it some suggested rubric criteria. You don't have to do this. It will generate it for you. You can look at it, see if you like it, and you can regenerate it again until it comes up with something that meets your expectations. And then here's what it creates: a beautiful rubric with all of the criterion and all of the grade levels and the text that goes inside of it so that you can use it to score your student work. What's really great about these as well is they can be downloaded or exported. You can export them into Google Sheets, you can export them into Google Docs, or you can just add it directly to your class or your assignment that students are completing. So there's a lot that you can do with one tool. So needless to say, there are all of these different tools, from crafting compelling hooks to writing stories, even writing informational text. So that's section 2, and here's our second pause point. If you're watching the video on replay, definitely take a moment, pause the video, pick a tool that tickles your fancy, and give it a try. See what you can create with the built-in Gemini skill. Okay. Moving on. Still don't have any questions. Please, if you are watching this, do not be shy. It is absolutely fine if you have questions about any of the topics as we're going along. I know I'm moving rather quickly, so I'm happy to slow down and show you something in more detail if you see something that you're curious about. Okay, our third topic, accelerate learning with Gemini Notebook. As I mentioned before, this used to be known as Notebook LM. And with Gemini Notebook, there is a lot to unpack. First of all, accessing Gemini Notebook. You're going to be in Google Classroom when you're attempting to access Gemini Notebook. And there's actually 3 different places that you can access the tool. The first place is you can open it directly in that featured resources section. It's sitting right next to the Google Gemini section. So you can access it here, and if you click on Create a Notebook, it's going to open the creating panel. The second spot you can access it is if you're building a new assignment for students, you're creating an assignment, you can create a Gemini Notebook for an assignment as you're creating the assignment. And so when you click Create, you can either create assignment or you can go down here and just directly create a Gemini notebook. And then the third place you'll see it is if you're creating an assignment, you've typed in all your specifications, maybe even attached documents, told the students what it is they need to do, typed in the deadline that they need, and then you realize I'd like to add a resource to support my students' learning in this assignment. Well, you can also attach it to an assignment. So if you click here, you're also going to get the option to access Gemini Notebook. So if you don't know what Gemini Notebook is and what it does, I'm going to give you this quick little overview of what the Gemini Notebook screen is. So you can kind of see all the different parts. As I said, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts. And essentially, Gemini Notebook is a suite of customizable tasks that are developed, not necessarily tasks, more like supports that are developed within this thing that they're calling a notebook. And these things that are developed come from sources that you determine. So I'm going to work my way from the left to the right on this anatomy of a notebook so you can see what all the features and components are. And then we're going to dive more deeply into see a couple of them live in action. So when you're building a new notebook, if you've clicked Create Notebook, you're going to see a panel that looks like this. And so the first thing that you need to do is you need to upload your own resources, or you can also direct the AI to suitable content online. So you can tell it, use this website. Maybe you want to use Encyclopedia Britannica, or maybe you want to use a different website. So you're going to tell it, you have full control over the sources it uses in its language model to develop whatever it is it's going to include in the notebook. So first you have sources. Once you put the sources in and it evaluates the sources, the next thing it does is it develops a chat based on those sources. So it's a custom chatbot, and it really allows the user, like a student, to interact with the chatbot on the topic. And it might even make some suggested prompts. So it might say to the student, ask me questions about the War of 1812. And then the student could type, tell me about where the War of 1812 happened. And the chatbot will interact with the student on that topic. And then this last panel, this is where I'd say all the magic happens. This is the studio. And in the studio, you have a suite of skills. And it keeps growing. So this screenshot, when I took this screenshot, there were 9 skills. And every time I go in there, there's new ones. And so the way it works is if you open up one of the skills, let's say I click on the pencil and I want to create a quiz. If I open up the quiz panel, it's going to allow you to type in what it is you want the quiz about and how you want it formatted for your students. And then when you click here, it will start building your quiz, and it will populate it down here, and you'll see that it's now generated a quiz for students based on these sources that you put in way back here. And so there's a whole bunch of different skills in this studio, from creating mind maps for your students, creating flashcards, making infographics, creating entire instructional slide decks based on the content over here, many, many different things. So in a nutshell, you're going to kind of see in this GIF that's running how this particular notebook was built. And a notebook really does look like what you're seeing on the screen here. I apologize if it's a little small on your screens. And so how it works is you upload your sources, as I showed you, and then B, in the middle, you chat with the information that is drawn from those sources. And then C, on the far right-hand side in the studio, you can create a myriad of things: audio overviews, study guides, frequently asked questions, briefing docs, paper outlines, many, many different things. And then all these things that are created in this one notebook can then be attached to an assignment in Google Classroom or shared with students so that they can interact and exercise kind of self-guided learning on your topics. So it's a couple things you can do in your notebooks in terms of configuring them. So you can, when you're making the chats, when it's evaluating the sources and creating the chat, you can configure the chat to have one of these different styles, these conversational styles. The default is pretty much kind of like a question answer style. You can have it act as a guide. You can have it actually analyze the sources. And then you do have an option to kind of customize it a little bit more. And then sometimes we know chatbots can be lengthy, a little bit verbose. So you do have the option to make it a little shorter or longer in the chat when it's finally summarizing your sources. Okay. Once your notebook has been built and you have all the tools in it that you want over here, and I actually even forgot to mention the deep dive conversation, which is another amazing thing too, that in the studio, where it would evaluate your source and actually come up with what's considered like a podcast conversation between two people talking about your topic. And it's truly amazing to listen to one, because you can't believe that these are artificial intelligence voices, because they sound so real. And then it's time to share it. So you can add a little welcome note at the top of it, so your students see kind of what your purpose was for creating your notebook. And you can share it as just chat only, or you can share it with a little bit more privileges. So you can change the sharing options in the notebooks. So very quickly, I have this mini video showing how you can create a notebook. Then you can actually have it analyze your content from your Google Classroom. I'm going to go back because that went so fast. You can have it, you'll notice here, this is the classwork. These are the items in this Forces Newton's Laws unit that this teacher had. And if you click on all of these things, this is the source that the notebook is going to use to create the chat and any other material. So now it's popped in, it's created the study guide. It's going to create, there's the study guide that students can use. We can do a deep dive conversation students can listen to that talks about the topic. And then finally, it would automatically add to the assignment and you can post it. The other thing you can see in your Google Classroom is which students actually opened the notebook and looked at it. So you can tell you can kind of tell who's using it and to what extent. So, as I said, that's a lot, but Gemini Notebook is really exciting. So I would say this is another great stop point for you. And I would recommend that you check out Gemini Notebook. And if you remember, there were 3 ways to access it. The best place probably to start is in the featured resources spot. Click on Create New. Find some sources either in your own drive or maybe even lessons that were included in an assignment that you shared with students. Ask a question in the chat space in the middle to kind of test out how it worked, and then create a resource in the skill creators section. And so remember, that was on the right-hand side, and that's that suite of 9 or so skills that can be customized based on your sources that you uploaded. So I encourage you to get in there and play around. Okay, still no question. Awesome. I think that means people are overwhelmed, or I'm really, really, really doing a good job. And I'm guessing it's maybe a combo. I don't know. Okay, so the next section, number 4, is Gemini Gems. Gemini Gems there are so many really exciting ways Gemini Gems can be used by students and by teachers in the classrooms. So let's start with how you would access a Gemini Gem. Very, very similar to how you're going to access Gemini Notebook. It's in the featured resource section under Create a Gem. So if you click here, it's going to open up the panel and get you started. If you're building an assignment for students, you can also go down here and build a gem as part of your assignment. And if you've already built that assignment and you want to attach a gem to it, you would click down here. So you've got 3 different ways and 3 different spots you can access it. So let me start by talking about what a gem is, because sometimes this is a little bit confusing. So it's essentially a customized version of a Gemini chatbot that you make and that you train and that you share, and it's going to be essentially only doing that specific, acting like that specific person or coach, as it says here, for students to interact with. So it's like a personally trained Google Gemini chatbot, and it does so many different things. So essentially how it works is if you're clicking on the featured resources and you want to access a gem, you can open up the featured resource panel and you'll see this. And you get a couple of options. So you can create a brand new gem. And if you do, that's going to involve you training the gem to do the task that you want it to do. For example, in my classroom, I had a crime scene that I would do with my students. And at one point, I wanted my students to be able to interrogate the 6 suspects that were in my crime scene. So I told 6 different gems to act like each one of the suspects. And then I shared those gems with my students so that they could interact with them and ask them questions about where they were on the night of the crime, what they do for a living, what is their alibi, etc. So to my students, it felt like they were actually interrogating a suspect. The gem even, I trained the gem to even use almost like vernacular that would be appropriate for the person they were interviewing. So there was a custodian, I sort of told the gem to speak in a certain way to represent the custodian, and we had a professor, and I wanted it to kind of adopt more of a, entitled kind of attitude. Not that professors have those attitudes, but I wanted that to have a little personality. So it was kind of a neat way to train the gem and let the kids interact with it. So that's just one example. There are so many exciting ways that you can get gems trained. In this panel, in the featured resources, you can either create your own or you can get started with a template. Okay, so they have 4 semi-pre-trained gems for you to customize that you might want to use. So they have a study partner, they have a brainstorm partner, they have one that will quiz students on a topic, and they have one that makes connections between class learning and practical situations. And so when you click on one of these, it's going to take you to a gem that's already partially programmed. So to train a gem sounds more intimidating, and it's easier than training a dragon. So to train your gem, what you're going to do is you're going to click Choose Class Content to personalize the gem. Then a list of eligible previously published class materials. So just like our sources in the Google Notebook section, you have the option to choose sources that you've already used in your Google Classroom to help train the gem. So, and then finally you can attach things. So the panel looks like this. It's really not particularly fancy. So let's say I was training this gem to act like a person from the past. Maybe this is a paleontologist that specializes in Homo florensis. So I can say, Homo florensis specialist. And then I can tell the gem, I want you to act as though you are a paleontologist and you are an expert on the Homo florensis species. And I give it some instructions, I can give it some resources, but because this is a language model, you don't have to feed it the source. It will act as a chatbot does, and it will do whatever it needs to do to become the expert on that topic. Once it's created, you can then share it with the students and they can interact with it like a chatbot. Okay. If you choose an existing gem, and in this case, I chose the study partner of that suite of 4 options, it looks very similar except for the fact that it's already pre-titled as the study partner. It already has been told what it's supposed to act like. So it's been kind of pre-trained. You do have the option to feed it a knowledge base. And so for mine, I fed it some information about waves in my science class because I want it to be a study partner with my students and be an expert on waves and assist them in their learning and understanding of waves. And so once you've uploaded your content to it, this study partner then turns into a chatbot for the students to interact with. And so we're going to look at one of these. Now this one down here is a quiz me that's being attached to a Google Classroom assignment, where then I'm going to make it an expert on the organelles. So it's already pre-trained, but what you have to do down here in the instructions is you have to make sure it's suitable for your grade level. So this is 9th grade biology, and it's talking about cells and cell functions. And as you see on the right-hand side, it is now turned into a chatbot that's going to give kids quiz questions about cell structure and function. And when you post it to your Google Classroom, it is now there as a gem for students to interact with and basically quiz themselves on cell function. Now, you're not going to be able to get quiz results from this, but this is, again, self-guided learning. This is for students to sort of learn about the topic and use the AI gem or the Google Gemini gem to support their learning. And I added this in here as a gem because I literally discovered this yesterday. And I was, as a former English teacher, I was so excited about this particular gem, which I found in the experiment section in Google Gemini. And what it does is it creates a customized picture book for students of any age level. Its only task and its only function is to make these storybooks complete with the illustrations. Now, I'm worried if I click on this, it's going to go into a new tab that you can't see. So I am going to have to pop off this screen just for a moment so I can reshare this tab. So let me get in there because I really want you to see how exciting this is. Hopefully we can find it. Here it is. Okay, so I clicked on that link, and you can click on the link in the presentation deck. And so this was created by a Gemini gem, notice storybook creator. And my prompt was very simple. I asked it to make me a storybook about Romulus and Remus and the founding of Rome for my 6th grade classroom to help them learn about it. And I clicked create, and this gem, its only skill is to serve as a storybook creator. So it wrote the text, it created all of the illustrations, and then it automatically turned it into this really cute flipbook format that I can share with my students in Google Classroom to support the understanding. There's also the option to listen to the story. There's a couple of voice choices.
Years passed, and the boys grew into tall, strong young men.
So it can read it to the students, or they can read it themselves. And so that was just a gem that was available in Google Gemini. So when I clicked on create a new gem, it took me out to Google Gemini, and I was able to make this. And I just thought it was such a great tool that could be used for any content area in the classroom. Okay, then we're going to go back to the slide deck. I apologize for jumping around on you. But if you want to look at that gem, this is the link to it. I shouldn't say gem. If you want to look at that storybook that I created, this is going to link directly to that Romulus and Remus storybook. If you want to find the gem itself, you would look in the gems section in Google Gemini, and that's where you'll find the storybook creator. So I just thought it was the neatest thing. So we're at our next pause point. Again, watching the video back, take this opportunity to pause for a minute. Go in and play around with gems and see all of the wonderful things that gems can do to support student learning. You've got your 4 built-in ones right here that would kind of get you started. Or if you're feeling ambitious, you can create a new one and then just click create gem and train that gem with your own resources or your own websites or just your own directions, and see if you can get it to act like a character from a novel or a person from the past or an expert on a topic. So many different things. So I think gems are really exciting, as you can probably tell. Okay, awesome. And I welcome questions if people are curious about things as we're going along. So don't be shy if you would like to ask questions. We are monitoring that chat. Okay, this is going a little faster than I thought, but we also have a lot in this next section. So I've noticed that the slide deck is available in the chat if you haven't seen that. And again, the slide deck has links in there for you to take a look at as we go along. Okay, so section 5 is interactive literacy and practice tools. And with the new Google design and the new Google format, you'll see on that home screen that they've come up with 3 new interactive literacy and practice tools. And these are surprisingly robust and quite obviously designed to replace other tools that you might be integrating into your Google Classrooms, and designed to replace them, essentially. So the 3 tools that we're going to look at is creating a video activity. So those are interactive questions for YouTube videos. We'll take a look at how we can create those. The next one is making a practice set. So these are, they're calling them interactive worksheets with real-time student support. So they're almost like a quiz. It really has the feeling of a quiz, but it's designed to allow students to kind of learn as they go. And it's that one opportunity, and I'm very excited about this, that I get to make math teachers happy, because this is a tool that is definitely something that math teachers will truly be excited about. And then over here, it's called the read along tool. And this tool has the general purpose of allowing students to read along with stories or to assess student reading comprehension. And so I think ELA teachers or reading teachers or English teachers will be very excited about that tool. Okay, so our first tool in this interactive section is designed to allow you to pull in any YouTube video into your building panel, I guess your video activity panel, and you have a choice of types of questions that you can add at a variety of stop points in your video. So you can add a multiple choice question at specified stop points, and you can add more than one. You can add a checkbox style question, or you can add an open-ended question for students to respond to. And so in my panel over here, the video I'm working with is called ALMA, A-L-M-A, and this is a wordless video I like to use in my classroom to support student learning of inferring. And so I have a series of about 12 questions that I typically use with this video. And in the past, the way I would do it is I have a worksheet, and the students would watch the video on their computers, and then the worksheet would go along with it and say, okay, at the 1 minute mark, stop the video and answer this question. What does the music suggest Alma is feeling? Or what does the character action suggest, is going to happen next? And those types of things. So it's very good for inferring. So I was really excited to see this video tool, this video activity tool now available. So you put in the URL for your YouTube video, or you can even type a title of a video. Maybe you're looking for a video on Newton's laws. You can pull that in. And then what you do is you pick your stop spots. And so here I'm encouraging a multiple choice question to be asked at the 1 second mark in the video. And so my question is, from the music at the beginning of the video, we can infer. And then I give the students choices. And you're also asked to pick which one is the correct choice. And in this case, it's the second one. And then you can continue on and add right here another question. Again, it can be open-ended, it can be multiple choice, it can be checkboxes. And that's really all there is to it. I found it to be a very intuitive tool and rather easy to set up. And once it is set up, you can test it out to make sure it's working the way you're anticipating. And the one thing I can say about it is it's not so much a data gathering tool. In other words, what I found is that you're not going to be getting a score or a grade from the students when they do the video activity. It's more a mastery tool. So when the students go through it and they answer a question, if they're incorrect, it will re-ask them the question until they get it correct, so that they can then move forward. But it also does have the skill of not allowing them to just, fake their way through it. They have to engage and they have to answer the questions in order to proceed with watching the video and getting credit for their assignment. So it is something to keep in mind. So it's not necessarily an assessments piece, and I think that's why they refer to it as an activity rather than a video assessment. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. And then once you click done, once you've built this assignment, it will be available to you to attach to a classroom assignment. It will also sit in a library within your Google Classroom for you to use later or reuse at another time. So these will sit in your storage or library space within Google Classroom for you to use again. So that's the video activity. But we don't have a pause point yet because there's 3 activities in this section. Our second activity is this practice set. And I have a few slides that go along with this one. So what this can do is it can create an interactive assignment and allow you to use the auto grading tool. So this is a little bit more of an assessment piece than the previous video activity. You can quickly identify concepts that need more instruction time and students who can use extra support. And then, as it said, you can use them as formative assessments to assess students. So when you're building practice sets, it feels very much like you're building a quiz. There's a few features that go along with it, and I think we have some animations here. So first of all, it does include multiple ways to ask questions. You have multiple choice, you have single select, you have open-ended, and you have checkboxes. And so you can see it's, again, just as intuitive as the video activity was. You can type in your either A, B, C, D with a screenshot of maybe something from an existing quiz, or you could type the question in completely. So they make that really quick and easy to use for teachers. It has, and here's where I said I was going to make math teachers happy. It has an equation editor. I was very excited to see this. Sometimes I feel like I disappoint math teachers out there with suggestions, but yes, you can actually put equations in here. Now, bear in mind, this is not just for math teachers. You could just type questions for any topic or any content area, but it's nice to see that this is an option as well. And then one of the things really neat is the reason they call these practice sets is after you've designed a question for students, they have this skills section. And so you can tell it what skill you're focusing on, and it gives you an option of giving the kids a hint if they're getting stuck, or actually attaching a resource such as a video or a link to a website or a slide deck so that they can self-teach themselves the topic if they find that they are getting stuck. So it's the skills section, and then that combines with this resources section for students to get a little extra help. And I thought that was really great. Okay, so that was our second tool in this section, and that was called Make a Practice Set. And then our third tool in this section is the Explore Read Along. So this one is so great for elementary teachers and teachers that are really focusing on the developmental aspects of reading. And what it has is it has fun reading assignments that track students' reading progress in 3 easy steps. So you can assign pre-existing stories to your students from a set of diverse grade appropriate reading materials, fiction, nonfiction, and even decodables. You can view, oh, my apologies, there we go. You can view the reading data for individual students. Because these are assignments that are pushed out on Google Classroom, you can actually see the reading data as after the student has read the story that you've pushed out to them. So you get reading accuracy data, you get fluency data, and you get comprehension data about the students. And you can track the progress of the students across multiple assignments. So you can push out many different books to the students. Now, the books have 3 reading modes. So you can push a little storybook out to students just to promote silent reading. And then with that comes comprehension questions. Or you can push a storybook out to students where they actually have to read it aloud. And it has live help, and there's also comprehension questions built in with it. Or you can have the students just listen to it. So perhaps you're in a quieter classroom mode, or perhaps you have headphones with your students. They can listen to the story and they'll still have comprehension questions. So once you pick your story, you're going to be picking which mode you want that story to be shared in. And then this is the step-by-step on how it works. So you saw where it's located on your Google Classroom home screen. If you scroll down, you're going to see these 3 tools just beneath the featured resources. So what you do is when the students click the assignment, you've pushed it out to them, the read along attachment opens and the reading material opens in a new tab for the students. If you have ELL students or students that need a support language, that is an option that you can toggle on and off. So this student's going to be reading in English. And then they click Start Reading. When they start, if you're in the mode where the students are going to be reading along, they have to read the material aloud to Dia. She'll help them read the story. And to help them, they read a line in the story and they click her picture, read the word, tell the meaning, break the word down to you, click the word. And then as they go through it, they're rewarded with stars if they do well. So there are a lot of built-in books, but I wanted you to see what the comprehension questions look like. So it says, as students progress through the story, they'll be presented with questions to help their reading comprehension. So in all three modes, whether they're reading reading along with Dia or whether they're reading silently to themselves, there are comprehension questions along the way. And so to answer that, they drag the appropriate response to the drop area provided on the left. So it's a drag and drop modality. Okay, so we're going to also take a look at one more feature of this, which is kind of surprising, but you can also make your own custom story. Now, this custom story is different than the gem that I showed you before. That is a whole separate thing that's in Gemini. This is a custom story that would be built within the Read Along tool within Google Classroom, but it does allow you to customize it. And so this little mini video is going to show you, and I'll try to stop so it doesn't go too quickly, how you can use Gemini to support you making your own read along with all of the features. So even that first part happened so quickly. So if you're building a new assignment for your students, you will notice at the bottom, you do have this read along option now. And so the first thing would be to click that, and it's going to open up the read along tool. Now, you can choose from the read along library. And as you see on the right-hand side, the 163 level reading books and growing. So these are all the things that are built in, and it shows the Lexile level of the read alouds that are in there. Or you have the option to choose your own or create your own content. This, you've got that option to choose the language. And then you've got the option to choose which type of activity the students are going to do. Is it going to be a level read along? Is it going to be decodable or an activity? So you can sort out the books. So as you're moving along here, it says, welcome to content generation using read along. So now what we've done, instead of selecting an existing book, we've moved on to the spot where you can generate your own book. Okay, so they're saying it's experimental, which means you're going to want to look it over closely, make sure it's doing what you want to do. But in this case, we're going to be making a book for a student in the 3rd grade. You can choose the plot of the story. You can add some notes. Perhaps you have some key vocabulary you want the book to focus on. Then it uses AI to generate the story. So we're going to let this roll on through. And this is going to be focusing on prefixes and suffixes. You get your warning to always preview the content. And so AI has now come up with this book, The Unforgettable Picnic. And what it does is it takes that book and it puts it in the same format as all of the other read-along stories with the 3 reading modes available with this self-AI generated story. Now that happened kind of quickly, so we're going to back that up for a second. So as you're looking at this, to preview it, when you're ready to attach it, you click attach, and that has now attached, pause it here, to this Google Classroom assignment that's being pushed out to the students. So you can see this book is being pushed out, give it a title, you give the student instructions as you always have, and once it is assigned, the students will have access to that custom story. And like everything in Google Classroom, you can select the students that you want to share the assignment with. So it's a pretty exciting tool that can be shared with our developing readers. So here's another stop spot. This is our 5th one in our webinar today. And this is where I'm going to encourage you to either try to play around with that creative video activity. Maybe you want to try to make a practice set that can be attached to an assignment shared with students, or pick from the suite of existing read-along stories that are in the read-along section, or see if you can make your own read-along story, all of which can be shared with students. And it would be an also good spot if you have any questions. Of course, we're moving on to our final section, which are 2 kind of like additional features that are part of this whole new back to school suite that we're sharing that Google is offering in Google Classroom. Okay, this is what I called the and more section. There's really only two things to unpack in this section, but they are important things. So the first new feature that you're going to be seeing in your Google Classrooms is the ability to tag an assignment with learning standards. So when you build a new assignment, let's say you're teaching Next Gen Science Standards and it's Newton's Law and that's NSPS 1-1. It's not. I made that up. I can't remember the actual number. You can now mark that skill. And also, once you've indicated what the standard is, you can then have Google Classroom make a standard specific rubric for scoring whatever that assignment is that's aligning with that standard. So we're going to look at how that works here. So this is where you'll see the feature. So in this case, Cold Cup Design Challenge is a project that students are going to be creating a cup to monitor thermal energy. And if you click Tag Learning Goals, which you'll see, it will pop up on yours, it's going to show standards. So now this one automatically came up with the science standards, but you can search learning goals. So you can search for your state standards, or if you want to do it skill-based, you can click on skills and it will show the skills and you can sort through them for what you're looking for. So you click on the ones that particular assignment meets. Okay, so we've clicked 3 here. We confirm, and so now they are attached to this assignment. The second thing that you can do is now create a rubric with learning goals. Now, this is going to be the kind of rubric that's going to be attached to the Google Classroom assignment as you push it out. So it will be the rubric that you would use to grade the student work within Google Classroom for this assignment. So if we click on that, it now sees that you have these 3 standards, and it has created a 12.4 criteria rubric, and it has attached it to this challenge for the students for you to grade with. Okay, so that was the first one. And the first one, I'm going to back up here. So that's the one where we're talking about learning standards now being built in and taggable for all of your Google assignments that you push out. The second one is a product of the first one, and that is because you now have a more robust level of class analytics that you can see, and the more tagging you do of standards, the better these analytics are going to be for you to see. So we're going to be much better with our data-driven instruction. So essentially what you're going to see at the top are these class analytics. And you might remember I sort of showed that at the very, very beginning when I showed the new screen. But what I love about this is it can talk about growth and student gains. So 3 students' grades increased over 25% since last month. 3 students have had an average grade below 70%. 3 students haven't visited your class page in the last week. That's not good. And so it talks about assignment completion, average grades. And so you can get a much better look at how students are progressing and growing, or maybe not so much, based on these analytics. And so Google has tried to make this a lot better for educators when it comes to looking at student growth. So technically that would be another stop spot for the video to go in and take a look at those analytics. But I suspect if you haven't built classes yet, you may not have any analytics, especially if your school year hasn't started yet. So there was a lot to unpack in that session today and a lot of information to share. So I wanted to leave us a little time in case people want to see some more live demos or have any specific questions about all of these new features.
Yeah, that was great, Mary. You shared so many amazing things. It was so helpful to just kind of get like such a good overview of all of these things. I feel like it's like what Molly, who I work with, always says. It's like a buffet. And I'm going to show you all these different things and you can pick like what works best for you, but there's all these different options. So I love that. And we'll stay on for a few more minutes too. So if you do have any questions, if you want to see something again or dive deeper into something, feel free to pop that in the chat and Mary will show you. I will not.
Yes. Oh,
Mary is our expert here.
Yeah, definitely happy to go into like a live version of Google Classroom. And if if you've been following along and something you were struggling with, we can go through things in a little bit more detail with our extra time for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mary. And just a reminder that this is recorded and you will receive an email with the recording 24 hours after this ends. So tomorrow afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from, you will receive that email with the recording and then a link to Mary's slide deck as well, because there are a lot of great resources in there. So you definitely want that. So we'll just give it another minute. But I don't see any questions coming in.
Yeah, that's okay.
You did such a good job, Mary. Everyone says
you
this
think
was a
that's what it
perfect
is?
demo. Yes. Well, okay. So somebody did say like no questions yet. Thanks for hosting this session. So I think people are good. You're doing a really good job of explaining everything.
I have a feeling people's brains are like mine was when I saw, I mean, these are some really exciting new tools for teachers. And, just the supports available to students, from having a built-in study guide or, a gem acting as a study partner or brainstorming tools or making resources that you can share with students. Like, it's nice to see the one-stop shopping idea. There are so many things out there now. I think Google's done a fantastic job of trying to keep everything in one place for educators. So we're not like, oh, let's use this tool for this and let's use this tool for that. And I think that's the most exciting part about it is let's be masters of what we're using and have everything in one spot.
Yeah, it's amazing. It makes it so much easier too, because I feel like at the beginning when like AI kind of like became so big, there were so many different platforms. Everybody was using like everything, and this just streamlines so much for teachers, which is so helpful. And then all your stuff is just in one place. So
exactly.
Yeah. Are you using gems a lot, Mary?
They excite me. Like there's just so many things you can do with gems. And I mean, I shared a couple of small examples, like the crime scene was probably one of the highlights of the year with the kiddos, just because they really thought they were talking to the suspects. I had even used Gemini to create pictures of these imaginary suspects. And so they saw the person's face in the gem and they, thought they were talking to the suspect. So, I mean, sixth graders are, they're still good with imagination, right? They can, they're not skeptical yet. So that part was fun, but there's just a never ending, number of things you can do with gems.
Yeah. I know, it's very exciting. I love your crime scene example. I mention that all the time. Like Mary Howard has this great thing that she does. I think it's just such a fun idea.
Yeah. Although the Romulus and Remus book, I discovered it yesterday, and I wish I'd had that when I was teaching ancient Rome. I stopped teaching social studies several years ago, and I was always like, narratives and story-based, history is what students want, that romantic side of history. To be able to have a little storybook that they could have read would have been amazing.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so well done too. And like their AI voice is like actually really good. Like it doesn't sound like a robot, which is really helpful. So no, that's really fun.
A little thank you. You're welcome, Sarah. I hope it was.
Thank you, Sarah.
So she knew about many of them, but there's always new nuggets. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. So I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mary. You're always amazing. You always share so many amazing tips. This was so helpful. Again, we'll be following up with that recording for you all and the resources. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.